I have strong kind of BI opinions. And one of the things I see in product organizations, and again, why I think SQL is so important, is low friction analytics result in shallow analysis and high friction analytics result in deep analysis. And so what I find is folks can log into whatever their favorite BI tool is and spend 3 minutes putting together a funnel or whatever, and then they don't really go back and look at it, or they don't really internalize the mechanics of what it took to build that data and what each that data means.
Welcome to part 1 of this week's episode of Unsolicited Feedback with me, your host, Fareed Mosavat. This week, we're joined by Claire Vo, who is one of the best guests on this podcast and a repeat guest from season 1. Claire is the Chief Product Officer at LaunchDarkly and also the creator of ChatPRD, an AI tool designed to help product managers build better product requirements and product specs. In this part of the episode, we dive into Claire's experience building ChatPRD. We talk about her stack, what specific tools she used, what she had to learn, and how to make this a really effective product as effectively a solopreneur in a business of one. She's just hired someone, but most of this product was built on her own. From there, we dive into advice for product managers building products and who want to be really high leverage. What can you do? What tools should you learn? What things should you focus on? And how might building a product like ChatPRD help you grow your career and be more effective? We also dive in from there in a wide-ranging conversation on a lot of other product manager skills, really focusing on Claire's view that we're going to be in an era of much more highly impactful senior and junior level individual contributor product managers. In this, we get into some of the things that we believe early career product managers should be focused on and how they can make their careers awesome. Hope you enjoy this episode. I love talking to Claire. She's always great. And this is one of the most fun conversations we've had on the podcast.
All right, Claire, welcome to Unsolicited Feedback. One thing we like asking guests is most people think it's X, but it's actually Y. What's your answer to that question?
Most people think it's no, but it's actually yes. So what I mean is most PMs think their job is to say no, to scope constrain, to no their way into something narrow. And I actually think PMs need to figure out better ways to say yes to things, and their ambitions need to get bigger. And often no is more self-protective than value generating.
Whoa. That is an awesome answer. I have to think about that one a lot. But I guess what I'm thinking is like, why is no helpful? No is supposed to be helpful because we're supposed to be working on the right stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean do less stuff to try to cut scope to make the like equation and the ROI spreadsheet work. And I think it does go there over time. So I'm with you.
Well,
the job is to do more with less, not to do less with more.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the other thing is no as a badge of honor, and like the first thing that's supposed to come out of a PM's mouth just feels wrong to me. PMs have taken it as a badge of honor to say no, and it's almost been instilled in a lot of the product content out there.
Yes.
Your job is to say no. And I just don't think that's the first interface a product manager should have with ideas that can be value generating with a company. And so I think there's something wrong about no being the mantra of product managers. I think it should be yes.
So I'm suddenly reminded of a conversation I had with Andrew Chen a really long time ago about the difference in his job now as a venture capitalist. And he said, your job as a VC is to find the things that if they work, they would be like massive changes to society, to business, like that would have huge outcomes. And I think the thing that's resonating with this, your job isn't to say no thing, is that culture of the default answer of everything is no is an incrementalist like worldview.
Yep.
So what would happen? I will challenge our audience here. Like, what would happen if anytime somebody came with you with an idea, your first question was, if everything went perfectly well, what is the biggest possible outcome that could come from this?
Yep.
And only after you've decided that the answer is not that much, say no, because it's like dream big, right? Sometimes you got to do those like high risk, but really high return things.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to get out of those if you're at the, well, what ifs? Yeah.
I'm so
That's all
happy
good.
to see you.
I'm happy to see you too.
Like, I could commit to a quarterly one of these.
Okay. Signed up. I heard commitment.
We'll do like an OKR season.
Everyone's favorite season. The best part of product work is doing OKRs, right?
10 out of 10.
Yeah. What's new on your side? You have a lot going on.
Oh my God. Works great.
Yeah. New job.
God, new job.
How many days in?
Like 100.
100. Okay.
Yeah. Something like that. A good fiscal quarter.
You're through the like thing you probably gave them at the beginning where you're like, this is what my first 90 to 100 days will look like.
So how's work going? It's the best. God, love dev tools.
Back to turning things on and off. It's like your core.
People are like, I just tell people the TM is so good. People love turning on and off code.
Yeah.
We do it every day.
Think about how much of like product release. I was thinking about this morning because I was like, Optimizely, LaunchDarkly, somewhat similar in a lot of ways, right? Not exactly. They're different products, different target audiences, different like things, but at their core, they turn things on and off. That's what's so great about it.
You know it, like people love it. Switches in my house.
Yeah.
It's a utility. It's also just like very fun to be in dev tools. The interfaces of products you can build, and we're like revamping our CLI, which is like a fun kind of content design kind of product and all sorts of stuff. Like
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then ChatPRD is popping up.
Yeah. Tell people about ChatPRD if they don't know about it, because this is incredible.
ChatPRD is an AI co-pilot that helps PMs create product requirement docs and other product work. And it grew out of it's basically like a replicate of me, what I use to survive my very cuckoo bananas jobs where I have to do many things at once, including being an ICPM, because you never really get away from that. And so it's a chat-based interface to develop PRDs, but it also has this like docs interface to it as well. So you can toggle between a chat mode where you're having more of a discussion and a doc mode where you're actually working on a doc, and it helps people create PRDs. And I just got a message yesterday that somebody said, I was going to hire an APM and I don't need to anymore because I have ChatPRD. Sorry, APMs. But they're going to hire a designer. So, awesome. I mean, you and I talked about this last time. Yeah. I think it's going to shift where hires happen. And I think product managers are going to be asked to be higher leverage.
Yeah. I think the piece that I'm in this change, and we've talked about this a couple of times, but I haven't talked to you about it, that as I think about connecting the dots on PMs being asked to be higher leverage, take on bigger roles. One effect we've talked about already is like less management, more building in high leverage ways, which I love. The one I'm worried about is what I call I think it's a De La Salle. It's like, how can I get ID if I don't have ID, if I need, whatever. I can't remember the exact line, but I am a little worried about, APM programs were a very common entry point into product. Obviously, there's also adjacency. As a startup, you're already disincentivized from hiring junior PMs. And if big companies stop hiring junior PMs or leveling them up, like where are product leaders going to come from is an interesting question.
Yeah, they're going to come from the cloud is where they're going to come through. ChatPRD is going to manifest itself in a physical form and run your company.
Okay, that's an option. I accept that answer.
Yeah, but this is well studied that these generative AI products benefit junior teammates the most. So the alternate take here is that people will hire more junior people because you can actually get more out of less expensive people when you pair them with a co-pilot for overall lower cost, and they're performing at just as high level as somebody with experience. So that's, I think, consideration number one. Consideration number two, I'm also getting a lot of PM job seekers using ChatPRD, and the other sort of, I have a testimonials channel where I bookmark for myself nice things that people say.
Your team of one is excited about the positive feedback.
I hired an half a person.
Okay.
I have a day job. But the one that I thought was so interesting that I saw today is this PM said, I've been shooting off customized PRDs to places I want to work.
Love that.
And it's getting me in the door because I'd say, hey, I wrote this PRD for a feature that you should have. And they're using ChatPRD to scale up their ability to provide value to a bunch of companies and hopefully get their foot in the door. So
I love that.
Yeah.
On point one, I think I saw this study. There's a great guy on Twitter. I think he's a professor at University of Pennsylvania, Ethan Mollick, I think his name is. Have you seen it? Yeah, I'm sure you've seen his work. And the study I saw related to that was about lawyers. And it was like the lower end of, I don't know how they put the x-axis, but let's say lower talent, more or less junior folks. What it did is it increased, the quality of their work, which I thought was super interesting. But what it did for the top 10% of people was it reduced how much time they spent.
Yeah, totally.
And so it makes good people faster. It makes less experienced people better.
Yeah.
And the thing it helps the most experienced people on apparently was like, I think this was employment lawyers. I have a friend who's an employment lawyer. So I think it's like stuff like employee handbooks, stock stuff, things that are like 98% the same and 2% different, where it used to be like had to do a lot of copy paste and typing. So I think I see the same stuff in product for sure.
Yeah.
On your second point, that's super interesting to me. Since you saw me sign up for LaunchDarkly, I assume you also saw me sign up for ChatPRD in the last few weeks. I'm a pretty collaborative person.
Yep.
And in advisory type roles, which I'm doing now, but also I remember this when I was applying for work, it's really hard to write an assignment for an interview alone. Like how many people do you trust to take a look at it whose feedback you actually think is good?
Yep.
I think out loud, like I have to talk it through. I have to work it out. And so even though it's a little different with the like text interface, it helps a ton to be like, no, not that, but this. No, not that, but this. And I think that back and forth really just helps you unlock your own thinking. Even if it asks the wrong questions, it helps you point it in the right direction to do the right questions.
And I actually did the same thing this week. Look, I've got main job. I've got side job that I do in the shoulder hours. I've got 2 kids. Like, mom has to be highly efficient. And what I did the other day is I've just been mulling over some strategy stuff at LaunchDarkly and just really thinking about it. And I was just driving into work and I just turned on ChatGPT voice mode and I was like, babbled for 7 minutes about this is what I think our strategy needs to be. And this is how I think it should work. And here are the considerations I'm worried about. And this is the angle I think we should take in, and here are the differentiators. And can you structure that for me in a way that is sensical as we go through? And then it structured sort of a outline of thoughts around strategy. And then I said, I think we need to be more specific about the execution pieces in this section. Here are some of my thoughts about where we could do better, that kind of thing. And at the end of it was 24 minutes. At the end of 24 minutes, I had a very serviceable thing that if the alternative had been I sit in my office and I open up a blank piece of paper and it was like, go, strategy, it would have been much more challenging. So it is nice to have that sort of on-demand thought partner, even if they're not they, even if he, she, it, they, whatever.
Yeah, we need to figure out what to call the robots.
ChatPRD.
How about just robot?
ChatPRD is a she.
Okay, great.
She's got an avatar.
I think that's great.
It's a she. But
maybe creators get to decide. That seems reasonable.
But it's having that thought partner on demand is really helpful when you need to sneak in collaboration at times where your team isn't available.
Yeah.
We're also time bound.
I think there are certain kinds of work that are by their nature lonely.
Yeah.
Because you might be considering changing everyone's job, and whether people like it or not, their own internal incentives drive their decision-making, their fear, their concerns. How would you think about a reorg?
Yep, totally.
That's like a tough thing to do. This is where external partners, advisors, those kinds of things can help. And I think there is a way that these tools can help that. I think also for me, this is a confession here. I am a notoriously intense procrastinator. I once heard an interview with Sheryl Sandberg where she called herself an anti-procrastinator or something like that, which means as soon as she knows something needs to happen, she has to immediately work on it. And I literally was like, I don't even understand that's a thing. It doesn't even make sense to me that anyone's brain would work that way. But part of it, and that I've embraced, because you have to just own your like nuances over time. And I used to try to fight it. And I just stand there at the blank page doing nothing for a long time. And what I've realized is that a huge part of my process is an internal debate where I'm bouncing ideas. And then when there is a deadline pressure, I'm able to do that synthesis much more easily. But if I hadn't been doing the thinking, the work wouldn't have been as good. So I'm doing this sort of like talking to people. I'm like taking lame notes. I'm thinking, breaking things down, debating. And I think this kind of process would be very valuable for someone like, because I like the debate part, and sometimes it's just hard to commit to the ending until it's the last second. And so maybe if you could get a rough version, the way I've hacked that for myself is now I open docs and just type. I don't try to make a doc. I just spew things.
Yep.
And usually that helps.
I'm going to put you on the early access list for when I get voice ChatPRD going. Yeah. And also when like the neural link just straight to.
Well, yeah, that's the
way to do it. Can I ask you about deadlines? Because I think this is so interesting in procrastination.
Yeah.
I was saying yesterday I only have 3 deadlines: today, tomorrow, or never. And everything is on a rolling deadline of those things. I'm either going to get it today, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And if it's not on one of those 2 timelines, you should put it in the never bucket in my mind. Now, yeah, of course I get to things next week or whatever, but it's usually a today, tomorrow, sometime timeline. And I'm curious how you process your tasks.
Yeah. This has always been a struggle for me as a procrastinator and super not type A. And basically I have a this week list that's like a to-do, and I do not backlog anymore for personal things because it adds too much anxiety to be like, here's a bunch of stuff I should do. And it's on this should do later list. And if it's not important enough to think about now, it's probably not important enough. And it's actually affected the way I recommend, I didn't invent this, but like the roadmap model I am most comfortable with is now, next, later.
Yeah.
And the rule about later is it can't have more than 3 things on it or 5 things on it, because you have this tendency to just dump stuff in later. And then the reaction is we're always behind. We're never getting to stuff. Because I had this thing where I was like, I would look at these 18-month roadmaps that teams would build. And I'm like, has anyone ever noticed that the stuff that's 12 to 18 months out is always the same exact shit every single quarter? It's always something like personalization, AI features, or whatever. It's stuff that's like big picture, pie in the sky type stuff. And there's just real work to do right now. There's like real things customers want. So that's how I manage it. I love this today, tomorrow thing.
Never. Today, I shouldn't say never. It's today, tomorrow, someday.
Yeah. I think in an ideal world, you would have now and next and long-term goals or themes, but not tasks. I think that's the best way to run life and work.
Yeah. If you want to peek really under how I do this at the tactics level, I have a Google document. It has everything that pops into my mind that I say I should worry about that. It goes on that Google document in a table with a priority. And I stare at that doc every day and move stuff out of either I've handed it to somebody as a category, later, deprioritized on a different page, or it's on my list of things I got to do. And I just every day have to look at it and plug 2 or 3 things off that just get fully done. Otherwise, stuff just doesn't move forward. It's just too overwhelming.
Mark Andreessen had a great blog post a long time ago on his productivity stack, and he talks about doing an index card. On the front, it's the 3 things I'm absolutely going to get done this week today. Yeah. And on the back, you write down all the other stuff you did.
Yeah.
So it's because there's always an email or a intro request or whatever it is, other stuff.
Yep.
And so that way you're like, oh, I have all these accomplishments and I did the 3 things I said I was going to do. The other one I love, I'm just throwing out recommendations here.
Productivity.
No, as a person who never feels productive and is a notorious procrastinator, I consume this stuff. And the ones that are very simple stick out, and all the like complex GTD, Pomodoro, crazy stuff like doesn't appeal. The other one is my friend Michael Sippy, who was a product leader at Twitter and many other companies, wrote this wonderful 40-word Medium post that's like, he called, I think, the universal theory of work.
Yep.
And it's 1, make a list of priorities. 2, prioritize the list in order.
Yeah.
3, start doing the things in the order of the list or something like that. And it's like all the rest of it, it all just breaks down to that. Make a list, put it in order, work on the first thing. That's it.
Totally. And it's very similar. I posted something this morning on X where it was like, how to be a high performer. I'm not even going to quote myself right, but it was like, ask what needs to be done. Do the thing you say you're going to do. And if you think something needs to get done, just go ahead and do it. And like, that's it.
Yeah. I have kids who are almost at their first job, working age. One is actually at her first job. She's a lifeguard. Yeah. I told her right before she went to do this job, I was like, look, it is very simple to be in like the top 10% of people, no matter what a job is. And they were basically the same rules. Rule number 1 is do the things you say you're going to do. 2, don't wait to be told what to do. 3, show up on time. I was like, I bet you that's it. That's all there is. If you do those 3 things, and then she comes back and she's, some of these kids at the pool just don't know what they're doing. It's like pretty funny. Yeah. So
look at us, high performers.
Can I throw out another tactical question for you? Is that all right? I'm curious not the stack exactly, like the technical pieces, but what are like the core components of ChatPRD? If I'm a product person looking to build one of my AI product like this, what are the pieces of the puzzle? What does OpenAI or whatever API things do for you? What do you have to do? Where have you struggled to make it great?
Yeah. If I had time for like a third laptop, like one more fun project, I think I would actually build the stack for people to do this. There is not an existing stack out there. Because if you look at alternatives, you can be on the GPT store, which I am, like a top 10 now writing GPT. I get no money. I get no analytics. I get ratings, which is great. And I get a link, which is great. But otherwise, I have very little control or outcome sharing as a creator. So it just hasn't matured yet, I think, as an app store. They're making lots of great progress and I've been very happy with my experience, but it just is not mature. So you have the sort of platform supported options, which are incomplete if you're a creator that is trying to monetize or otherwise get access to the audience that's using the product that you've contributed to. I had to build the thing basically full stack as a standalone application. It is based on OpenAI APIs. I'm actually pushing the edges of how some of their things like function calling can work. I had a wonderful OpenAI support experience. So shout out to all the OpenAI engineers on Twitter, X.
It's still Twitter on this podcast.
Yeah, help people like me. But how you build it. Okay, so what you want it to be probably is a chat-based interface that users can sign up for, pay you some amount of money for some amount of access, that expresses basically a prompt and a set of tools or functions that can be used for a specific purpose. So you have to have all the basic web app stuff like authentication. You have to have payment stuff. So I use Stripe, obviously, for subscription and payment management. But you do have to have the sort of app wrapper of showing a chat interface, doing the streaming, saving the assistant or prompt instructions in your backend, customizing, which we do, assistant and prompt instructions for users. And then it is on top of OpenAI APIs, although I may do some model testing moving forward. And then, of course, you have to have all the other stuff like analytics and error monitoring and feature flagging and experimentation and all those things. So it is a full stack web app that I had to build from scratch. Luckily, there are a lot of great tools out there. So I'm using Vercel's AI package, which puts some of this chat interface out of the box, which I think is really nice. Although I've customized most of mine. I'm using out of the box OpenAI models, which is great. And then this is what's fascinating to me. I did a startup 10 years ago, the web app, similar needs, different product. It took us, and I say us, it took me and a team of engineers time to build this thing.
Yeah.
And I built ChatPRD truly over Thanksgiving weekend while my kids were taking a nap, because there was so much I could puzzle together and put together to put this out in the world. There's actually a lot that needs to be built. And then if you want to do anything past the chat interface, which I do, we have this like chat and then toggle to doc mode interface. We have sharing, we have inline editing, all sorts of stuff. There's just a lot of custom development that needs to happen, which is cool me how I spend my Saturday and Sunday mornings.
What percentage of the work do you feel like is doing AI things, training? I don't even know the details here. Like training stuff, adding prompt stuff, futzing with how it works versus, the scaffolding of building a fully functional business model forward web app type thing.
Yeah. So the business model forward web app was pretty easy.
Okay.
The actually getting a assistant instead of instructions, instead of functions that works in a relatively predictable way is a lot of work. It's what I did on my own over several months to tune it to be as good as it is right now. And that does take work. As I said recently, non-deterministic system is non-determining. Yeah. It's hard to pin it down on getting consistent and reliable results out. So that took a long time. Where I actually spend most of my time is building differentiating features beyond the chat. So everything's a chatbot. And so chatting is a solved problem. But what is not a solved problem is actually multimodal interface with data that switches from chat to something more structured and back to chat. So that's where I've been spending most of my time is how do I create this data model and product that can allow PMs, in my case, to have a conversational interface, but also have an interface with the entity that they're working on, the work product itself that has, and both sides have both context. And that really isn't a solved problem. And I've been building a lot around that. So that's where I'm spending most of my time.
Love that. That's super interesting. I think the reason I ask is because the kind of advice I think a lot of product people are getting right now about, hey, if you're not in an AI PM job, how will I learn these tools? How can I use them? And the first question they ask is like, what things should I spend my time on? And it's, of course, you should use ChatGPT, you should play with all the models. But I think there's some other pieces here that are important, like learning what it takes to build honestly, just an app that charges money and has sign up and sends email. There's like value in getting that going. Vercel, I think I've heard now from almost everybody, if you want to get something going. And then maybe a little on is this all hosted on Replit, Heroku?
No,
like, where do you put it all?
It's all just next on Vercel. I've been quite happy.
Oh, okay.
We gave
amazing.
A good product.
Cool.
They also hopped into my DMs to help me with my AI problem. So good developer community.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think this is all just useful things to know is it looks like magic. Someone like release this cool product that PMs use, but just get under the hood. What are the pieces of the puzzle? What's so important? I think it helps people like feel like they can do it too. And I hope.
I have another piece of advice for PMs in this moment right now, especially if they're interested in building something like a chatbot. It is exceptionally easy right now to do what was the job of a software engineer. 10 years ago, I probably would have said, somebody else needs to build this for me, stand it up. And I'm a serviceable software engineer, but I still worked with the team to build this thing. And now I truly think if you follow a tutorial with zero technical skills, I'm talking like zero technical skills, you can go zero to chatbot in a day with what's available. And I think just as a PM, simply knowing how accessible some of software engineering is going to become will transform how they think about the job to be done. Will they be able now to build rough prototypes with some more technical skills? Will they be able to build products for builders that take into consideration automation in developing code? And so I just think there's also just a lot of benefit into taking the gift of accessibility of some of these tools and developing your own technical skill sets.
I think that's great advice, in part for myself, to actually play around and mess with this stuff more. Because I was once a serviceable software engineer. I don't know if I am anymore, but I was at one point.
We need to do a parents hackathon.
I love it.
And we'll just do a day. You've probably experienced this as well. And I just wish more product managers experience this, the ability to iterate on a product you're working on directly in code to feel out what is the right experience. One of the most fun things about working on ChatPRD is I sit with local open and I go, I think we need to have a share experience. And I know what it might look like. And I look at comps and then I start building it and I pop it up and I go, that's just not quite right. The text isn't right. And I change it and I feel the interface and I go, oh, we could add this feature. And I go on branches. And that sort of very tight loop between yourself and the code and the product is quite generative. And I wish more product managers could experience that.
Yeah. My personal place as a person who was a growth leader for a long time is I did a lot of SQL and data analysis on my own and like tons. At almost every company I've ever been at, I have the highest query execution count of any non-analyst at the company. Every time they're like, hey, look at the leaderboard. It's a whole bunch of data scientists and that kind of thing. And part of what that does, I knew I wasn't as good. And I knew it was hard to get to the final product of an important dashboard, piece of analysis, understanding. But that tight loop is what it's all about.
Totally.
Right? You add friction. I got to put in a request. The request goes into a pile. It gets prioritized. It goes on someone's later list.
Yep.
It never gets done. We don't look at that thing. And it doesn't hurt the really important stuff, but what it hurts is all the like edge stuff.
Yep.
Oh, a little share flow. Let's fix this thing over here. Or I'm curious about like, people who do X, Y, and Z just because it's a curiosity.
Yep.
I call it like wallowing in the data, just like enjoying the experience of looking at stuff, not with any goal in mind, but for the sake of looking at it.
Yep.
And what it did is I could hand somebody something that's 3/4 baked
Yep.
and be like, I think I see something important and I think we should lean into it.
Yep.
And now it goes from a high cost task to a low cost task. And it pops up the priority list immediately. I think it's the same with engineering. Yeah, at Instacart, we had a bunch of SEO pages and stuff that had a bunch of bugs and problems and issues. And I could write them all out and I could spec them all out. I could say, here's what all the issues are and file them all and make sure we did them. Or I was like a serviceable enough Ruby engineer to go just jam on a bunch of bugs and fix them all and be like, this is what it should look like.
Yep.
And I did that. And sadly, the friction of getting set up as an engineer at most companies is really high, which is a huge bummer.
Yeah.
But again, reducing friction doesn't just save time. It doesn't just save money. It makes otherwise impossible things possible, which is, I think, what's the most interesting piece of the puzzle on it.
Can we wind back a little bit to SQL as an accelerant of product careers? Because I think learning SQL was the inflection point of my career, because it not only gave me access to a whole bunch of data and insights and ideas and impact that I just wouldn't have had access to before, but it also helped me grok data models and business models in much higher or much more depth than before, and made me just a much better product manager overall. And so if anybody asks me what skill should I pick up as product manager, I say SQL, and it's, again, so accessible right now. And I'm curious if you feel the same way.
100%. I actually think the most popular tweet I have ever written is about this thing. It is literally about, you should write SQL. And I think what I said was, it makes you a provider of answers instead of a generator of questions.
Yep.
And that is like a superpower in any, at the time I said non-technical role in a startup, basically. Yep. And I've seen it time and time again. Like, the best ops people were the ones who were serviceable, writing queries, at least editing queries, messing around with them.
Yep.
And the fact is that, sorry for anybody working on BI tools, et cetera, but self-serve analytics is a white whale. It's not a real thing.
Yeah.
It can be for 90% of questions. And actually, I've been very impressed. I've dabbled in Amplitude implementations at larger companies as part of my advisory work. And wow, you can do a lot there. But every business has weird little things that are only in the database that are just their custom ways of measuring activation or whatever it is, that are just nuanced enough for how the business works. And sometimes you got to break the tape and get in there and write a query. And I think it levels it up. I think it's super important. I don't know if the same exact advice will be true when generating SQL is a possible thing.
Yep.
But you should know how to answer
your questions.
A basic business question on your own in the data and be confident it is correct.
Yeah.
Might be the generalization.
Yeah. I'll say something else while we touched on BI, because I have strong kind of BI opinions. And one of the things I see in product organizations, and again, why I think SQL is so important, is low friction analytics result in shallow analysis, and high friction analytics result in deep analysis. And so what I find is folks can log into whatever their favorite BI tool is and spend 3 minutes putting together a funnel or whatever, and then they don't really go back and look at it, or they don't really internalize the mechanics of what it took to build that data and what each that data means. And you go in and you're actually forced to do that and spend some time with the data in a SQL query or directly in the database, and you start to bubble out nuances that give you richer insights, and that data tends to be much more useful and relied on a day-to-day basis. And it's a generalization, but I've always felt this way, that the results you get out of analysis are often proportional to the effort you put in getting that analysis right. And the lower friction it is, the lower value it's perceived, and people rely on it less. And I've struggled with that in product organizations where we have thousands of dashboards and reports and analysis because they're so easy to spend up and no one looks at them.
Yeah. Okay. I agree wholeheartedly with that. I'll even bring a very specific example.
Yeah.
At Slack, we want to understand what the conversion rate of our homepage is.
Yep.
Pretty simple.
Don't we all?
How many people signed up divided by total number of visitors per week? Not exactly. Once you dig in, and this is literally like I was messing around, me and an analyst were messing around with this data. Turns out a lot of people went to slack.com to log into Slack. And we have like millions of MAUs. We should be a little careful about it because the idea was our conversion rate is so low. We have so much traffic. Of course, it's way under benchmark. Of course, we should be able to improve. We don't need more like organic acquisition. We need to do it. That still turned out to be true, but like the nuance here is so important. Some people go to log in. Ooh, this is trickier. So now I got to exclude anyone who did a login event after their visit. So now I can't use an off-the-shelf like GA tool. I can't use it. I have to actually do 2 queries and then sub them out and make the new denominator have a time basis. How long? Should be 5 minutes, should be 10 minutes, should be an hour, should be a day. Okay, got that. Oh, it turns out some people accept invites and they're checking it out. Okay, now we have to exclude those. Some people create a team and immediately realize they should have done one of those other things. So now our numerator is wrong. When we changed, it's a long story, but I did this whole thing that tanked our new team creation rate. But it was because we were helping people get to login who meant to be logging in. So again, this is where shallow analysis leads to poor results. There is someone out there who would have not shipped that like login simplification feature because it dropped the new team creation rate. But when you look, none of those teams, the activated teams, like the ones who actually did something and invited people, stayed the same. So this is where the nuance really matters. And I am notoriously a pain in the ass about this with teams where I'm like, I don't believe that metric, but I think it's as a result of having gotten into it, you learn that there are always bodies buried somewhere. So I'm with you. I also think this is the problem with a lot of off-the-shelf experimentation tools, if it's you or other, is that I do think it does make experimentation really easy. And certain kinds of experiments they're really hard. The amount of time I've spent on spec reviews on who should be included in this A/B test and it's almost always wrong for like people who are new to growth and that kind of thing. I'm like, they'll be like, our conversion rate is 0.001%. I'm like, who'd you include in the experiment? All DAUs. And you're like, but only 2,000 people a day see this page. And it's, oh, whoops. It's like stuff like that. And it's getting better. The tools are getting much, much better. But I saw a lot of shallow experimentation when experiment at times as well for the same reasons that self-serve analytics are a problem.
And I think maybe those both speak to the same. Now let's bring it to my favorite topic, which is like product theater, which is, are you very sure that what you're doing is doing the thing that you say it's doing? And it is very easy with off-the-shelf tools to look like you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing, but not actually do it. And the more we reward people from a career perspective for looking like they're doing the thing, that's the piece that I get really worried about. And so I do think shallow experimentation is not healthy. I don't think shallow analysis is healthy. But they're very easy, invisible activities for folks to say, look at me, I'm doing work, and it has impact, and there's numbers next to it. And so I do think there's conflict in how we reward PMs, what we train them to do, how we train them to do it. And not everybody is lucky to have someone like you in the room teaching them the nuances. But teaching the nuances comes from experience the nuances, which comes from seeking the nuances.
I think you're bringing up a great point, which is there is certain stuff you can only learn by doing and by experience. And I know experience is underrated in Silicon Valley, but I think there is something to that learned knowledge. This guy, Cedric Chin, writes a blog called Common Cog where he talks about these kinds of things. And one of the things he talks about is tacit knowledge, like knowledge that is, there's no rules, frameworks, formulas. It's really, I've seen these 8 things. It resembles 4 of them. Here's the commonalities. Here's what I think you should go to. Things you have to learn by case study or by actually doing it. And I think those things are still very durable. ChatGPT is really bad at data stuff, or at least it's like the really junior, I think you did this wrong kind of thing.
I agree. This is top of mind for me because we just went through a kind of talent promotion cycle. And I'm sure you've seen this in your career where PMs that have had a solid 6 to 9 months of doing a good job on one project really want to be promoted. You're laughing. Yeah, it's like we're on the other side of this. Text those PMs. Come on, we got to get a little bit of a break.
I know.
You know where I'm going with this, which is I've done 6 to 9 months of great work. This one project has gone well, and therefore I am GPM or director of PM or whatever it is. One of the things that I've learned, and only through experience, is being right is temporary, and it you have to have at bats to know how to navigate a diverse set of experiences and really get to consistent, repeatable, positive outcomes. And one project does not a product genius make.
No.
And I've learned that through very humbling experiences as a product manager and product leader and founder. And so I have the benefit of time, but that's something that I've always struggled until you feel it, until you feel that you are not the one always moving the genius product forward, and there are other forces at play that you need to learn how to navigate and work through. It's very hard to establish what is true progression in the craft of product management, and it has to take time.
I remember very distinctly one person that I gave this feedback to, which was like, we're looking at the ladder, we're talking about the promotion, this person really wants to get to the next level. We go through, and I'm like, you have demonstrated all the things.
Yep.
How come I'm not promoted? Need more time. Need to see it repeated.
Yep.
Not really hard feedback to give and hard to hear.
Yep.
It's I'm doing the right thing. I just have to do it for longer.
Yep.
Doesn't feel satisfying, but sometimes it's the truth.
I just had a terrible thought, but it's going to be a fun conversation. Do you think PMs should move to more variable? If we're all wanting to be PMs as GMs and own business outcomes and tie to revenue user growth, I've always had PMs that can get bonus on company performance. But I'm just curious how this all shifts.
Yeah. Okay. So I've thought about this a lot, especially as a growth person.
Yep.
I think like 85% of product work is really hard to do variable. Most people work on feature strategy, and features goals is to extend the number of use cases that your existing customers have. Usually it doesn't help. It's hard to measure retention, hard to measure monetization. You can do adoption type bonusing, but then you're really like doing here's a sort of proxy thing. So for GME things, so product lines, self-serve businesses, which I have run, man, I wish I got comped the same as a salesperson on the self-serve business in Slack. I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be off on an island somewhere. But I don't know. It's really, I think it should be a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah,
for sure. I think equity is supposed to be that.
Yep.
I think great companies understand that and throw a lot of equity at the people who are the highest leverage in the organization because they just feel it. But it's not quite the same as like input turns to output on the variable comp. It's such a great question because if I'm a really great product manager who just ran a really great project, but I'm still like a year or two away from a promotion, maybe it should be more bonus.
How do you?
I don't know. I don't know how to deal with that. So interesting. Incentives are everything. And I want to keep them in an IC role because they're awesome.
Yeah. And I was thinking about what you, Brian, and I were talking about last time we were here, which is how do you incentivize people to stay in these IC roles, or how do you incentivize them to do great work, but in the format that is most beneficial to the company while also sharing rewards? And how can we decouple compensation from skills, from time, from impact? What is the right mix of all those things? And we just think about this because we all think we're being scientists when we put these ladders up with these words on them and we say you've demonstrated competencies or you've not, or it's been enough time or not enough time. But at the end of the day, those are qualitative assessments based on perception. And I wish we could I wish two things. One, I also wish sometimes I was comped like an AE on some of the things. I would be on that island with you. I think people don't quite understand how variable comp can look. It's quite tasty.
I would have hired very differently.
Yeah.
And on what I staffed, if it was like, what is your incremental return divided by employees?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the impact we did was when we were a relatively small team.
Yep.
And then as we added more things, we were doing more speculative stuff.
Yeah.
That's good. But also like our dollars per head of incremental impact dropped pretty dramatically, you know?
Do you see, I mean, I think about it a little bit. I try not to, in my mind, boil down the team to like revenue impact over headcount spend. But I do think that managers and leaders under consider that a lot when adding headcount. I don't see that calculus naturally coming out of many managers or leaders. I don't know. It's because it feels uncomfortable. I don't know if they feel, like you said, that the correlation is fuzzy and so it's unfair to draw that ROI or what it is. But I think, and you and I talked about this before, I think in this world in the future where you don't hire an APM, you hire a designer plus an AI product, you have to look at the net ROI of that investment relative to headcount and what you're maximizing and what you're driving for. And I do think the best performing public companies are very efficient with headcount spend relative to growth.
I remember at Slack when we started thinking about these kinds of things like much more thoughtfully. And you can do a little bit on public comps like R&D, sales and marketing, this kind of thing, headcount per function at different revenue levels. What's our overall revenue ARR per head?
Yeah.
And you can start to ask good questions that way. I think the problem when it's top down like that is everybody feels like it's now a zero-sum fight with everyone else. So it's complicated, but I do think it is ultimately the role of the core leadership of a company to ask and answer the question, what is our capital allocation strategy for this business in terms of headcount?
Yeah.
Why are we doing those things? And when are we checking that we were actually right? Because headcount usually, these days aside, easy to go one way and very difficult to go the other way. And so, I've heard great things. I think it was Asana I heard. I don't know if this is true. This is just a rumor, unsubstantiated rumor Friday here, that actually had thresholds for teams that was like, at this impact, we'll unlock this many headcount. Yeah. And I think mechanisms like that can be really useful.
I think that's definitely a way to think about it. And it goes, I like your comment of, I would have done the team a little bit differently. We were most efficient when we were smaller. I have just been thinking so much about the intense efficiency of small teams and how I think we give ourselves permission in large organizations to do things that don't add value because the team size necessitates it. And that you have to be incredibly active as a leader to keep large organizations from degrading to that. And so I think like with the right leadership, you can actually be quite efficient with large teams, but I think you have to be purposeful about it. It comes more naturally with the smaller team.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you've experienced the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It seems like a law. I've often gotten the feedback that I'm not as aggressive on like approaching new opportunities as I should be.
Yeah.
And I think part of that's like a natural stinginess around adding new people. I think maybe because I don't love managing large teams, like personally. And so I think organizations want more. And the easy answer to wanting more is add more people. Now, of course, everyone knows as you add more teams, let's say the probability of success for those things goes down, right? And probably not very non-linearly, right?
Yep.
But it doesn't mean, this is the tension. This is why I recommend to smaller companies not to go to what I call the zone defense model of teams too early, which is like, this team owns this part of the product. This team owns that part of the product. Because what happens is it's really hard to tell someone who has a 40-person team, our priorities don't require 40 people on this thing.
Yes.
Think about a product manager. Think about the most common thing that happens in quarterly planning. We don't have anything for pod 3 to do. And then that's where you invent some stuff, right? I think team structures have a lot to do with this. It's really hard to move a group of people. One company I advise has moved to a fully functional org for this reason. They have temporary pods that are on their planning cycle to solve certain problems, and tech leads and PMs and those kinds of things. So it looks like a pod, but that means they can move people without changing their managers, which turns out to be like one of the biggest frictions of this. So they have a front-end engineering team, a back-end engineering team, that kind of thing, a product team, a design team. And I know it's an early experiment and we'll see if it works, but it gives them a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, I've tried in both this job in progress and previous job. Is my organization design philosophy is like flexible by nature. We should just presume we are moving people. We should presume priorities change. We should presume investment shifts. And we need to build an organization that is resilient to that change. And both identity, personal impact, and management relationships can remain durable even if the work does not. Now, I'm very interested in this experiment and how it nets out because it's hard actually to do in a hierarchical organization. People build manager relationships based around the context of projects or product that they're working on. They build cross-functional relationships with PMA or designer B. They start to create these efficient plays of how the team operates. The problem is the problem space that they're operating in shifts in criticality, importance, strategic necessity, and it's very hard from an org design perspective to balance that. I often find that is just solved by hiring the right people. What I say is teams can't be charter bound. They can't say, this is my charter and never shall I pass the boundaries of that charter or else I lose my identity. PMs need to have their identity be aligned to driving business value as opposed to working on a specific thing. And then the management is the hardest part because that is a fixed hierarchical relationship that encompasses a single person in a group of people. And any one of those dynamics changes things for many people.
Yeah.
So the management piece has been the hardest, which is now why I'm so interested in this idea of like higher leverage managers, where managers are empowered and have the tools and the remit responsibility to manage like 20 people. And then there's some other mechanism, whether it's AI or some other context storing mechanism that sustains the durability of the context between the manager and the IC. I don't know.
It's really hard. I will say I've been a believer in mission charter-driven teams for a long time. I think especially when they're goal-oriented versus surface area-oriented, meaning I don't own this part of the product, I own this outcome.
Yeah.
I'm a growth person at heart. I grew up as a PM at Zynga where we had very almost whole companies that were separate from others, GM model, et cetera. And I love a lot of the benefits of that. I think the hardest part is it only works if like this initiative will always exist and always be worth about this cost. And so I'm struggling with this one because I used to think functional organizations were dumb. And I'm starting to like think differently about it and starting to realize that flexibility is so important. The problem I have personally with this kind of structure, and this is just literally who am I and how do I want to work, is I think it tends towards saying, hey, management is management. It's mostly people and process type stuff versus craft, because it's hard as a manager of 20 people across 5, 6, 7 different initiatives to have sense of the craft and be like there. And especially on the product side, I love doing the craft side. I want to talk to you about who's included in your experiment, how we're going to measure results, and where the pixels are. That's hard to do if the org, it's super fluid. That said, I wonder whether if you went to it's not manager, but director, which is the thing I feel really good about. So I'm the director of growth. I don't manage the PMs working on it, but I drive their craft. Like maybe there's a version of that organization that could be cool.
Or it's director with IC captains. On the team. It's very interesting. Look at
hard.
Whatever we decide on, we'll be dissatisfied with in 3 years. So
all abstractions are leaky. All org charts are broken. It is what it is.
Ideal team size 1.
Ideal team size is 1. It's certainly less than 10. I think those things are pretty clear. I think the rest of it is like, okay, what do you want to prioritize for? You got to try things.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of our episode of Unsolicited Feedback with Claire Vo, the CPO at LaunchDarkly. If you're early in your product career, I hope this episode has shared some great tactics and strategies for how you might be really high leverage in an organization. For product leaders, we hope we've inspired you a little bit to understand how you might be able to better equip early career folks on your team and turn them into highly effective teams of strong individual contributors with wide ownership.